It's time for another crossover battle. Welcome to a fight where darkness isn't just an atmosphere, it's a weapon where shadows don't simply follow the body, they obey it, and where victory doesn't belong to the strongest fighter, but to the smartest one. This matchup isn't about who can punch harder or move faster. It's about control, about exploiting conditions, about turning the battlefield itself into a trap. On one side, a living manifestation of darkness, a quirk that grows stronger the less light exists, capable of overwhelming enemies with raw, uncontrollable force. On the other, a shinobi who weaponizes patience, a tactician whose shadow techniques are guided by one of the sharpest minds in anime. Dark Shadow from My Hero Academia versus Shikamaru Nara from Naruto. Power versus preparation, instinct versus intelligence. Let's break them down. Dark Shadow, the beast within the darkness. Dark Shadow is not a conventional quirk. It isn't a simple extension of Tokoyami's body. It's a semi-sentient entity with its own personality, emotions, and combat instincts. Under normal lighting conditions, Dark Shadow is already dangerous. It can strike at range, grapple enemies, shield Tokoyami from attacks, and move independently across the battlefield. Its strength is well above average, capable of breaking solid structures and overwhelming trained opponents. But darkness changes everything. As light diminishes, Dark Shadow's power skyrockets, its size increases, its strength becomes monstrous, its speed and aggression escalate dramatically. In deep darkness or nighttime environments, Dark Shadow becomes almost uncontrollable. It can overpower high-ranking heroes, dominate large areas of terrain, and attack with overwhelming ferocity. At its peak, Dark Shadow becomes less like a quirk and more like a rampaging monster. However, this overwhelming power comes with a severe trade-off. The stronger Dark Shadow becomes, the harder it is for Tokoyami to control it. Commands become delayed, precision disappears. Dark Shadow begins acting on raw instinct rather than coordination. In extreme cases, it has even endangered Tokoyami himself. Dark Shadow is devastating, but it lacks restraint, it lacks planning, and it lacks awareness beyond pure aggression. Against a tactician, those flaws matter. Shikamaru Nara, the shadow that thinks ahead. Shikamaru Nara is not built for direct combat. He lacks overwhelming physical strength, flashy destructive jutsu, or high-speed offense. What he has is something far more dangerous: time. Shikamaru is a genius-level strategist with an IQ over 200. He analyzes situations rapidly, predicts enemy behavior, and constructs layered strategies often several steps ahead of his opponent. His primary technique, Shadow Possession Jutsu, allows him to extend his shadow across surfaces and immobilize opponents completely. Once connected, the enemy is forced to mirror Shikamaru's movements, rendering them helpless. Crucially, this technique does not rely on brute force. It relies on positioning, timing, and environmental awareness, areas where Shikamaru excels. Beyond that, Shikamaru is a master of battlefield manipulation. He uses terrain, lighting, obstacles, and misdirection to funnel opponents into disadvantageous positions. He sets traps in advance, lures enemies into overcommitting, and strikes only when success is guaranteed. Shikamaru does not rush, he waits, and against an opponent who grows reckless with power, waiting is lethal. The fight. Darkness spreads. The battle begins in a broken, partially lit environment. Uneven terrain, scattered debris, fractured structures casting long shadows across the ground. Tokoyami doesn't hesitate. Dark Shadow surges forward immediately, launching heavy strikes and wide-range attacks. The pressure is immense. Shikamaru is forced to retreat, narrowly avoiding blows that would end the fight instantly. The power gap is obvious. In a direct confrontation, Shikamaru cannot survive. But while Tokoyami attacks, Shikamaru observes. He notes how Dark Shadow's movements change depending on lighting, how it becomes more aggressive in shadowed zones and slightly restrained in brighter areas. He notices the delay between Tokoyami's verbal commands and Dark Shadow's response. Every second gives Shikamaru data. Dark Shadow grows larger, spreading across the battlefield, breaking terrain, flooding the area with overwhelming presence. Darkness deepens, unintentionally strengthening it further. Tokoyami pushes harder, believing raw power will secure the win. That belief is a mistake. The trap, turning power against itself. Shikamaru begins repositioning deliberately. He moves through shadowed pathways that intersect with multiple light sources, stretching his shadow across debris, walls, and fractured ground. His movements appear defensive, but they are calculated. Dark Shadow lunges again, faster, stronger, less controlled, and that's when Shikamaru makes his move. Shadow Possession activates, not toward Dark Shadow itself, but toward Tokoyami. The connection locks. Tokoyami freezes mid-motion. For the first time in the fight, Dark Shadow hesitates. Without its user's movement and clear intent, Dark Shadow loses coordination. Its attacks become wild and unfocused, lashing out without precision. Shikamaru exploits the moment. He forces Tokoyami's body to step backward, dragging him toward a brighter zone of the battlefield. Floodlights, open space, reduced shadows. Light overwhelms the darkness. Dark Shadow shrinks. Its power drops sharply. Its aggression fades. Its movement slow. The beast weakens, not because it was overpowered, but because its environment was stolen. Analysis and verdict. Why Shikamaru wins. Dark Shadow is one of the most dangerous quirks in My Hero Academia under the right conditions. In complete darkness with no preparation, it can overwhelm nearly anyone, but this matchup does not favor raw power. It favors control. Shikamaru's intelligence allows him to identify Dark Shadow's dependency on darkness immediately. Instead of fighting the shadow head-on, he manipulates light, terrain, and Tokoyami himself. Shadow Possession bypasses brute force entirely. Once Tokoyami is restrained, Dark Shadow loses effectiveness rapidly. Shikamaru's layered planning ensures that even escalation works against Tokoyami rather than helping him. This fight is decided by preparation speed, and Shikamaru is faster mentally than Dark Shadow is physically. In a sudden ambush, Dark Shadow could win. In a real battle, the strategist takes it. Dark Shadow is power unleashed, Shikamaru Nara is power controlled, and control wins. Winner, Shikamaru Nara. That's the fight. Do you think Dark Shadow could dominate in absolute darkness? Or does Shikamaru's intelligence always find a way? Let us know in the comments. Like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more crossover battles where shadows decide everything. Until next time, stay sharp.